Hello everyone. Okay, welcome to the first recording of the new academic year. Um, and what we're going to look at today in this first session is it's quite a big PowerPoint about the origins of the US and the Constitution. You're not going to be asked an exam question, like evaluate the reasons why America was formed or anything like that. But the Constitution is central to the American system, and its peculiarities, its kind of setup, does hark back to its origins. So it is quite important to know what the origins are, because that helps you to understand a little bit why the American system is the way that it is. So I'll put up a PowerPoint and I'll talk through it. It is quite a long one, so I'll probably end up doing two videos because I only get 15 minutes or something like that free on this system. Okay then, so as I was saying a minute or two ago, the Constitution is central to the American system. Okay, everything the USA government and politics relates back to the Constitution. There's a copy of the Constitution in the back of the Bennett textbooks. I've also scanned it, and I can't remember if I've actually put it onto Teams yet. If not, I will do. And I'll probably put it on for everything that we do, every kind of section that we do, because we will keep referring back to the Constitution. Okay then, so very quickly then, the origins of the United States, because this kind of does inform the Constitution. Originally, the American system, the Americans were formerly people from Europe. Many of the people that first went to America were those fleeing religious persecution in Europe. So you had some of the extreme Protestants, like the Puritans from England, who went over to the colonies. So Pennsylvania, the Penn family, were quite radical Protestants. You also saw some Catholics as well, also fleeing Europe, who went over to the Americas. And America's always had this long tradition and this long history of immigration and immigrants coming in. So the original settlers were, of course, Europeans, as I said before, many religious people. Later on, you had people, a lot of Irish people came across in like the 1800s, fleeing the potato famine. Lots of Italians came over as well in the late 1800s just to get the poverty of Italy. You've had many Jews came over to Americas, obviously during the 1930s. It's had a long history of immigration. Now, originally, going back to the 1700s or even 1600s, the British who controlled much of what is now the United States were these original 13 colonies. They're on the right-hand side of the map, i.e. the eastern side, because that's nearest to Britain. So you look where that picture of the boat is, Britain's kind of the other side of that boat. And the British kind of ruled America with quite a light touch. They allowed them to form their own colonies, and each colony had a governor who ran the colony on behalf of the British Crown. Technically, he was appointed by the King of England, but in reality, like the American elites, the movers and shakers of Georgia would say, we'd like to have this person as our new governor, please. George, do you agree? And George would email back. They would email, would he? He'd send a message back saying, okay then. It was quite light touch, and the British were quite happy for that light touch kind of situation, because they were interested in trade, basically, and making money. They didn't really want any trouble from these new American colonies, and they were just quite happy to get the trade from these colonies, essentially. Now, it all went a bit horribly wrong as time went on, and again, I'm not going to go into the whole ins and outs about the divorce from Britain, which essentially is caused by the French Indian Wars. So in the 1750s, essentially it was the First World War in many respects. There was a big global conflict, Britain and France in particular. France had a lot of control over Canada and into Ohio. These colonies in America were spreading more westwards because when they were growing the tobacco, it really depleted the soil quality, so they had to keep moving further westwards. They bumped up against the Native Americans in those areas, who then made allies with the French in order to try and stop the British colonies moving westwards. And essentially there's a great big war, it's called the French Indian War. It cost an awful lot of money, and as a consequence of that, Britain decided or believed that the colonies ought to pay for some of the defence of their colonies, basically. And that is the root cause of the tension between Britain and the colonies. And what you see is that you see the British demanding taxation from the Americans, the Stamp Acts and stuff like that. The Americans say they don't want to pay this taxation. They say we don't have any representation in the UK Parliament or the British Parliament. We haven't voted for these taxes, therefore why should we pay them? And then there's some famous events take place, like the Boston Tea Party, where the merchants of the city of Boston trying to show their disgust about these taxes they have to pay, basically throw tea, which is quite a rich commodity, into the sea. Interestingly, they actually dress up as Indian, Native American Indians. That's to kind of show, their unhappiness. And this leads to the divorce, basically. So you see these increasing tensions, and then this essentially leads eventually to a war of independence. It takes place between 1775 and 1783. So in April 1775, the 13 colonies declare their independence from British rule. They say, Britain, we have nothing to do with you anymore. We're going to rule ourselves. You can go and do one, essentially. 4th of July 1776, the colonies formally issue a Declaration of Independence, where they formally write down that we are independent from Britain. And it has this famous beginning, preference, whatever it is, to the Declaration of Independence, where it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute a new government. So in other words, we believe that we have a right to life, liberty and happiness, not to pay taxes unless we do so through our consent, and any government which tramples on those things, we have a right to alter it or get rid of it. This is very much, isn't it, in the ideas of people like John Locke, this idea, isn't it, of these classical liberals, that the state should be limited and, taxation should be done with the consent of those being governed. So it fits very much into that classical liberal model, which I'm sure you all remember so fondly from After Christmas and Unit 1. Goes right against what Thomas Hobbes would have said, our conservative friend, who said you shouldn't remove governments. Okay, the document then listed 27 examples of abuses of power by the British and George III. And these include things like quartering of soldiers in people's houses. So when the British sent soldiers over to the Americas, they basically kicked people out of their houses and put soldiers in them instead. And interestingly, that particular abuse is in the US Constitution still today, that this is something which can't happen, as are some of the other abuses as well. So they listed 27 examples of where George III had been a meanie, basically. They have the war. Interestingly, there's very few actual battles take place. There's a Battle of Saratoga quite early on, but the Americans lose most of the battles because Britain is the superpower of the day. But what the Americans resort to is guerrilla tactics, hit and run things in like forests and things like that, which just depletes the British kind of ability to defeat the colonists, I suppose. In some ways, it has some echoes to Vietnam in the 1960s, where you had the Americans, going the other way around, you had the Americans with all the military force and the Viet Cong who ran like a guerrilla war against them. It was kind of a bit like that in some ways. Anyway, 1783, Britain gives up basically. We can't be asked anymore. But the Treaty of Paris is signed, and the colonies are now officially independent from British rule. No doubt they had a big party. Okay. Oh yeah, I meant to mention as well. Notice, by the way, we talk about these. We hold the truth that all men are created equal. That didn't extend, of course, to Africans in the Americas, because of course most people who went to the Americas went there to flee persecution and stuff. They went there kind of voluntary, I suppose. But of course, the Africans didn't. They came over as slaves. They had no choice. And during the War of Independence, some of the Africans who managed to escape kind of the plantations and stuff during all these uprisings and stuff, made them actually sided with the British against the Americans, which you can kind of understand. So they had a party, okay, and then they came to this idea, well, what do we do now? What form of government should we now establish? We fought this war to say we don't like the nasty Brits, okay, because they've been meanies. And of course, all their problems weren't ended. The French had really helped them out, but who knows, the French might change their minds at some point and decide to turn on the American colonists. The French, of course, had lands in like Louisiana and some of and obviously in Canada as well. They've been expelled from Canada. Louisiana and some of those Caribbean islands, they were a potential threat. What would happen if the British in like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years decided actually we want to, take over the show again? The Spanish were around as well. So they were surrounded, if you like, by enemies. But their first thought was, what type of government shall we establish? And their first idea was something called the Confederacy. This was ratified in March 1781. And what it basically was a loose alignment of these 13 colonies. So what it had was a very weak central government. There was no executive, there was no like president or any equivalent of that nature. There was no national judicial kind of branch. All power would be vested in the individual states. So the individual states, like Virginia and the Carolinas and Georgia and New Hampshire, they were almost like independent states with just these very weak connections between them in terms of central power. There was a Congress. It was limited, though, just to foreign policy and to try and coordinate the states. So I think the idea was, if we get threatened, if, say, the French decide to attack Georgia, then this National Congress would kind of get all the other states to kind of line up and agree what action they were going to take. But all political power was held by the 13 individual colonies, New Hampshire, Georgia, Virginia, etc., etc. It's like an even looser version of the European Union, I suppose. You've got these individual sovereign kind of colonies or states with very weak kind of political ties between them. There were some serious problems with this, though. It was I missed an O out there. It was too weak. Okay, the colonies were surrounded by strong powers. There were some fears among some of the leading colonists, some of the leading families in the Americas about what would happen if we were attacked again. Is this really a satisfactory kind of situation? And these concerns and fears kind of came to a head in 1785 when there was a squabble between the state or the colony of Maryland and Virginia. And basically it wasn't really resolved, and it kind of escalated, and I think there was a realisation that actually perhaps we need to have a look at another way of running our new country, if you like. And what I'll do on the next video, because I'm on 13 minutes, is I'll explain how that led to the US Constitution.